The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
This time we usually get an approval of the official agenda. I have several items on here I'd like for you to consider for consent purposes. And the first item under Mayor's business is item C, which is the amount for maintenance of the emergency sirens. Under board business, item A, number 1.
Mayor, let me correct
Go
that
ahead,
item.
wait a minute. Listen to him, Jim. Go
It
ahead.
should be consideration of the purchase of software from Tyler Technologies for the courts, contingent upon approval by the city attorney. We have the funds set aside in the $5 court assessment, so the funds are there. We just reviewed various software packages and found that to be the most reliable one.
So you're saying is go ahead and consider it on the consent?
Right, for the courts, not in police department, and contingent
Okay.
upon
So
city
we'll just
attorney.
take the police department off.
And amend the agenda to say upon approval by the city attorney. What do you say?
Did you hear? All right, if you go to, on the next page, item E, item G, under airport, remove the request for the $5,900. We're gonna try a co-sharing of the fire department and the airport. That's to be removed. Item 2 would be consent under airport. Office of the City Clerk's approval of the claims docket. Item 3, request authorization into a 5-year rental agreement for postage. Under electric department, item 1, consent, personnel, consent, public services, 1, 2, and 3, consent.
Mayor, pull number
Yes.
2 from the consent agenda. Number 2.
Did anyone have any items that was recommended for consent that they would like to hear or need any further explanation?
I wanted to consider item F under board business, the holiday schedule. That's on my agenda.
For consent?
Yes, sir.
Okay, consent, item F under, board business for consent. Any others on here for consent? If not, do I hear a motion that we accept these consent items and an approval of the official agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second that we approve the agenda with the consent items. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. It brings us to the approval of the minutes of the city of Starkville for November the 6th.
Move approval of the minutes of November the 6th, 2007.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of November the 6th with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. It passes. Brings it down to the comments of the mayor and the Board of Aldermen. Would like to congratulate the Parks Commission for a dog park that we now have in our city. Others of us would have attended if we'd known about it. It brings us down also that Mr. Mills would like to congratulate you again on your election to the chief, to being a chief, justice court judge, and that we appreciate the time that, trying to make you a Supreme Court judge, sounds like that. And we appreciate the time that you've taken to serve us and the community, and we appreciate your time and service, and understand that you will be giving us a retirement issue later on. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Tonight we have an agenda that is filled with public appearances, as well as public hearings. And we would like for you to please cut your reports to be as short as possible. Catherine, I see sitting back over here, to remember when I was on the school board that we had an alarm clock in which we had annual reports given by the principals, and we held them to 5 minutes, is that right?
That's correct.
And we were very successful in that, because usually you can say all your key words in about 3 sentences of what you're trying to translate. At this particular time on our agenda, we have comments from the citizens, and I will caution you not to go over your time. We allow approximately 3 minutes per person on citizens' comments, and I will hammer down when it's time for your citizens. At this time, we do open it up for citizens' comments. If you have any complaint, any issue you have with the city, you're welcome to come forward and say so.
Good evening to the mayor and board.
How are you?
Doing okay. I'm from Ward 7. My name is Alvin Turner. Merry Christmas and New Year's to all. The citizens just have one problem. We hope it don't become a real problem. We have a flashing billboard between Zach's Chicken and the complex on Highway 12, and it's beginning to agitate the driver on Highway 12.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Would anyone else like to come up and complain to the city? Excellent. We'll move on. It brings us up to the public appearances, and the first we have tonight is Mr. Wesley Jones. What?
Got a man that wants to come up with 3 minutes, you're back to back.
Well,
He
tell him
just-
to get on
he
up
didn't
here.
understand you.
Huh?
He didn't understand you.
Come up then if you have something you'd like to say.
complaint though, that's why it all goes so smooth.
Do you have something nice to say?
Sure, well, I hope
Excellent.
it is. I would like to,
Tell us who you are and.
my name's Steve Swisher.
Okay.
I live in Ward 2, and I have spoken to my alderman, and he's asked that I come down and read this little piece of paper. It says, on this, the 18th day, I'm asking to be appointed to Ward 2 position on the Planning and Zoning Commission
Okay.
for the city of Starkville. Upon your consideration and appointment, I'll do my best to help make decisions that will be most beneficial for the city of Starkville and Ward 2.
All right, I believe that one of the issues that we did on the consent was to, do you have your letter with you and everything as such? And if you'll give that to Planning and Zoning Director, Mr. Ben Griffin, that we will have probably at the next board meeting or so, the formal appointment of this. We've asked for a request, and that was in the consent agenda. And if you'll just give your letter of interest to Mr. Griffin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We wish we had more people that would apply for some of these commissions. Anyone else? Not necessarily complaint, but statements or any other issues. We'll move on.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. My name is Wesley Jones, and I come to give you a little history about my father. Father moved to Starkville, Mississippi, with his wife, Sarah Lee Jones, in 1940, and started a shoe repair shop which still in existence now that I am running. He also, in the years that he was here, he was deacon at Second Baptist for over 61 years. He built a senior citizen complex here, E.S. Jones Apartments, which is still in the family on Long Street. This is something we would like to do for the families, rename that street in his honor.
You're talking about from Greensboro back to Highway 82,
Right.
right?
Right.
The only request that I've heard in regard to this, if we rename it, if we would like to say, get the addresses corrected on the street. That's the only request that I've heard, about that. That wouldn't be a problem with it.
I don't,
Okay. You've gone through all the petitions and other
Right.
issues in regard to this, and you've got the people that live on the street to agree with this, I believe,
right,
and everything's in proper order. Is that not right?
right.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, in accordance with the report that we have received in our package, that Mr. Wesley Jones has met the requirements that's required of the city in renaming a street, and that the city staff has also checked with the post office and 911 emergency, and they determined that there is no conflict. So I would like to move at this time that the request be granted, that we rename Long Street from Highway 182, Martin Luther King, to Greensboro Street, the Ernest Jones Drive.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Perkins?
No, I was, the gentleman from 4 seconds.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem.
We have a motion and it's second.
Does
Is in discussion.
Does the motion include a correcting of the addresses? Because I think we currently have two 100 blocks on Long.
Well, if that is a problem, it will be, but in the report that we have, it says the city has checked with the post office and they have determined that there is no conflict. So if there's a conflict, then I'm sure the post office would.
I'm sorry, we didn't inquire of numbers. I had no idea there was a problem with the numbering. This was just to make sure that there was no conflict in the names.
Okay.
I was not aware of any problem with numbering of that street, so that's new information to me.
Is that something that we can get investigated and get maybe corrected? He just pointed out we got two 100 blocks. I mean, you know, if I live in one 100 and somebody lives in the other 100, it could be a problem getting it right.
Well, now it's 100 and it's on Long Street versus 100 is on Jones Drive.
corrects
and there
itself
would
by
be an
changing
issue,
the
But I
name.
don't know enough about it to be able to discuss it.
Could we not make the motion contingent upon resolution of that?
I don't know what the significance of the naming of the streets got to do with the number.
I don't, but that
Well,
was
you
the
got
question
one block
that came
that have
up.
100, you got a second block that may have 100, Jim, so you have two locations that have 100 on the thing. That could be an issue.
If they're both south of 182, then we'll be happy to deal with it. We'll look into it either way, but, you know, it may be that it's resolved simply by having this renamed.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. We'll now vote on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Get your street, man. That's your dad.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brings us down to Diane Wall. Are you here this evening?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you were hiding behind the newspaper report. I couldn't see you.
Good evening. I represent Tippahawk County Humane Society, which has city and county residents, and I personally live in Ward 3 of the city. And we have a request, and we want to first express our appreciation with this Board of Aldermen helping us make great progress on the shelter and the treatment of domestic animals. Our request is that we have an interlocal agreement in which the county could provide $5,000 to cover surrender of county animals, which now costs $10 per animal.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I would make a motion that we direct Attorney Favor to work with the appropriate county officials in drafting an interlocal agreement and bring it back for adoption as quickly as possible on this issue.
Second.
Motion is second. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Public hearings. Ben, I believe that's you. This is a adoption of a ordinance replacing the special use exception with conditional use. Ben, I'd like for you to explain maybe the essence of that, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What this proposed ordinance does is replaces what's currently used, which is a special exception use in the existing codes with a conditional use. And what it does, it provides guidelines and criteria for review of those uses. There's several examples, and the best one that I can explain is a daycare in a residential neighborhood as opposed to an industrial park. Same use in two different areas carries different implications, both on the daycare center as well as the adjacent properties and vice versa. Also in this ordinance, there's a proposal to remove the 3-acre minimum for churches in all areas, with the exception of the areas in the downtown, which are zone C3. All references to distance separation have been removed from the draft, which was done, I believe, at the last, actually 2 meetings ago, and a draft was provided at the last board meeting prior to advertisement. The conditional use ordinance provides that there be a public hearing, a legal advertisement, as well as notices to adjacent property owners, and posting of a placard on the subject property. And attached to the ordinance, there's a fee resolution to cover the cost of the advertisement and notifications. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I think there's 5 criteria for review for the Planning and Zoning Commission as well as for the board, and can address those as far as the same way as we do on rezonings and other issues that come before the P&Z and the board.
We'll start off with the board if they have questions, and then we'll go to the general public if they have any questions in pertaining to the essence of this public hearing. And this is the first or second?
This is the second. The first public hearing was held at the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay. Board members, does anyone have questions?
Sale of alcohol taken out of this exception.
All the references to that have been removed, yes, sir.
Sir?
Those have been removed. At the last meeting, or actually 2 meetings ago, there was discussion here about that, and I revised the text, and at the last board meeting in y'all's packets, there was a revised text with strike-throughs and underlines, and the board directed me to move forward with that. So what you have in your packet today is a clean text with those references removed.
With no mention of alcohol.
No mention. So nothing changes, no mention of it at all. Now, what this ordinance does do is allows conditional use review of establishments that do serve alcoholic beverages. So now that if a restaurant that serves alcoholic beverages was proposed to be established, there's some criteria to review that particular use in conjunction with a site plan review. So there's
Will that be brought up during the site plan?
Yes, sir. So there will be 2 things that come together. There's a site plan review and the conditional use, because that's a little more specific criteria than the site plan review.
Other questions? Does the public have any questions on this particular issue that they would like to ask? Give the public a general idea of what you're basically doing is clarifying some of these issues. Just take just a minute, if you will.
Yes, sir.
We've got
Basically,
an overview audience here tonight.
the special use exception is a term that it's a planning term it's getting kind of antiquated in use, in the fact that it looks like someone is getting special or preferential treatment. There's 5 criteria that are involved, and I can just go over those real quick. 1 is land use compatibility. 2 is sufficient site size and adequate site specifications to accommodate the proposed use. Number 3 is proper use of mitigative techniques, in other words, screening and buffering from other uses. Number 4 addresses hazardous waste. And number 5 is compliance with applicable laws and ordinances. So those are the 5 criteria that would need to be addressed, which I would provide in a staff report to the P&Z and the board.
Going once, going twice? Yes.
What's that really mean?
Ron's like me, what does it really mean, Ben?
It means that any type of use that comes under the conditional use classification in the permitted use chart, which is the next item that's up for review, requires a little closer look in that use may have some site improvement requirements or some impact on the adjacent property, as well as, like the daycare example I used, if you put the daycare in an industrial park traffic noise are gonna have a bigger impact on the daycare, to see if that's an appropriate request. Right now, we have nothing. There's no review criteria at all. It says special exception use, go to the planning and zoning, go to the Board of Aldermen with no review criteria other than whatever someone brings up. They don't have to come back now, they don't have to come back and be reviewed, but if they were to expand or if they were to relocate, they would have to come under that.
What Ben is basically trying to do is go through some of the ordinances and so forth, and is to make them more appropriate for today's environment and questions that are raised in the environment today that people may have, and to codify, I guess, is a correct term to use.
Yes, sir.
If there are no more questions, do I hear a motion that we may want to adopt this ordinance replacing the special use exception?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. We've heard this for several board meetings. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
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 2 nays, okay? So we have a tie.
You got a right to
I know.
settle this thing.
Yes, well, I just voted for it, which passed. Second, public hearing, consider the adoption of ordinances amending and revising the chart of permitted uses. You want to expand on that just a little bit?
Yes, sir. Basically, the chart of permitted uses is the chart or the table that's listed in the Code of Ordinances, which determines what uses are right now permitted by right. They're identified with an R on the table, and uses that are allowed as a special exception use, and those are identified with an E on the table. What this ordinance will do is replace permitted by right as permitted with a P, replace special exception use, which is an E now with the previous ordinance, replace that with a C, so it's Ps and Cs. What the chart also includes are zoning classifications which had not previously been included in that permitted use chart. And these are new zoning classifications that the city's adopted that were not included, such as PUD, planned office, some of the other classifications that were listed but that were on the zoning regs but not listed on the chart were agricultural and I believe there was one other. There were a couple. So what this does is now includes all of the zoning classifications in effect, lists all the uses, whether they're permitted or allowed as a conditional use, and basically includes all the classifications on a single chart.
Board members have questions?
So this includes the things that the old one didn't include as far as zoning classifications, and simply changes the letters.
It does that, and there were also some there were some uses that were duplicated. There were some uses that were not clarified, and there were also some uses that we have in the city now that were not even on the permitted use chart, but because we have some existing, I felt like we needed to include those in the permitted use chart in case any additional uses were to come in. We'd have something to address. And the best example I can think of, I know there were only 2 or 3. One is a tattoo parlor. We didn't have anything in the table in the permitted use chart for tattoo parlors, and we have one in town. If another one wanted to open up next week, they basically could go anywhere and any zoning classification. So I felt like it was appropriate to add that. There were about 3 others, and I can't remember what they specifically were.
And for the clarification of the public, since you brought up tattoo parlor, if I'm reading this right, it would be a conditional use in what, C2 or an M1 zone?
Yes, sir.
Conditional use in manufacturing or C2?
Yes. Which is where the one is located now, is in the C2.
Mayor and Board, I would move approval.
Ron, did you understand what they're doing this time with this? If you understand, I probably understand, okay? Okay, you moved approval,
I did.
do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second, that we approve this. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. All those opposed? Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, sir.
It brings us down to the mayor's business, and tonight we have a report from our beautification committee. This is, I see Clyde and Ron and Richard. Is anybody else here that's part of that committee?
I don't think they're gonna let Dr. Walker speak this evening, though, so.
Well, they're not.
You got limit your time.
Told them I didn't
You
think
guys
they were
got
gonna let
3.5
talk.
minutes. I'm giving you a half minute more than.
I will respond to that by saying, while brevity might be the soul of wit, it's also the heart of oversimplification. That having been said, you all have a copy of the report. I gave you a second copy. It differs from the copy that Tammy gave you by one letter, and he who or she who finds out what that letter difference is will get a happy face and a gold star. There's a point in the missing letter. I trust that you either have read it or will read the report, and I'm not going to embellish on what's already here. I do, however, want to call your attention to a couple of matters that we would like to have some action on as soon as possible. I'm looking at 3B, the providing of public funds of up to $15,000 in the next fiscal year to match funds that this committee will attempt to raise for the purposes of landscaping and other forms of beautification, largely on public thoroughfares and public lands. This amounts to actually about 10% of 1 mil, which I think that you perhaps can plan far enough in advance for it to build it into the budget for next year. But I'd also like to indicate that while we're going to try to raise this money as soon as possible, if you can make a commitment to us tonight, we'll get moving on trying to raise that money, so that next year when you adopt the budget, perhaps you can then allocate that $15,000, assuming that we can raise it between now and next year's budget. So we'll need some action on that as quickly as possible, so that we can move forward on that.
Basically, what you want to do is get the city commit $15,000, and you would match that in private sources for beautification projects.
That's the plan. Now, that does not include volunteer work. So that's very, very different animal entirely. Item 5, and we need some answers on both of these, if possible, tonight. The idea for 5A is that if you pass this, the committee will then go to some of the garden clubs or some independent folks here in town and ask for volunteers to serve on an evaluation committee, which then we would allow. The Starkville Daily News has agreed to move with us on this, to recognize positively those businesses in town that have in fact made a commitment to beautification, to landscaping, to making their properties look better. It's a reward for that, but it would be a reward handled in a detached and objective way, so that my brother-in-law wouldn't get the award because I'm on the committee. It would be a detached group of people who know what is good landscaping and good commercial maintenance. And B, I think that Ben and Lynn and several others would probably like for us to have this approval here, so it would give the city's imprimatur on the committee going to the appropriate people on campus. And we're looking basically here at the student newspaper and a few student organizations to try to enlist their help in this process of making Starkville a more attractive and cleaner and healthier place to live. If you have any questions about any items here on this list, I'll be glad to answer them. The list represents committee discussions over at least the last 6 months, and we sort of put them all together a couple of weeks ago, and they are here now for your observation and your action and your questions. If you have
Any board members have questions?
Dr. Williams?
Yeah.
On your $15,000 request there so we're looking at $30,000 hard cash money to spend on plant materials and others to go various places around the city?
Yep.
Okay. Any
That's
idea of how did we come up with $30,000 as a number? I mean,
Well, I was thinking about trying to go for a mill. I thought a mill would raise about 170,000. Or we could have asked for 17,000. 15 just sort of resonates a little bit better in my ear than 17.
Okay.
Lynn and I were talking. It's 167. Yeah, 167. So what we're asking here is actually less than 10% of one mill.
Right.
So there's no magic to that number.
Okay.
We may come back, assuming that we're still in existence, at the beginning of the next fiscal year, we may come back and ask you all for 5 mills for this. But just as a start, the city's getting a bargain. City's getting that money back again for beautification, plus any kind of volunteer labor that we can build into this process.
I was just curious if y'all had specific ideas of what you wanted the money for, and that came from a budget, or that's all.
I have a couple of comments I'd like to make.
Yes, sir.
On item 4, under enforcement, and again, I do commend y'all for passing the solid waste ordinance. I think that's a real leap forward. However, as they say, but I do see problems with enforcement already.
With what now?
Enforcement, the problem with enforcement. Now, we've removed a good number of these so-called garbage corrals around town. But now, then, instead of using the corrals, they're going out there and throwing their garbage out there today, and just like they used to. I want to make sure that everybody understands. I want to make this abundantly clear. I'm not in any way criticizing the code enforcement officer, none whatsoever. He has probably what I consider an impossible job. But one of the things that makes it impossible for him is I'm told he has to go somewhere. If you have your trash can or your garbage out on the street 365 days a year, he's got to go to you 4 times before he can issue a citation to the owner. Now, that's a waste of good time. Now, it seems to me like the owner is responsible for his property. It seems like the first time that the occurrence that the garbage cans are out, or whatever the situation is, he can go to the owner and say, okay, we'll give you a warning now. The next time this happens, we're going to give you a citation. Now, I don't know how many times your daddy told you 4 times to do something before you did it, but mine didn't do that. How many times your daddy tell you to do something before you did it? And I don't understand why you've got to be told 4 times, and then the next time, they'll give you a ticket. I mean, the highway patrolman doesn't do that. Let you run 4 stop signs before he gives you a ticket on the 5th time. So that's my comment on this. Why is this going on? That he's wasting a lot of time, it appears to me like. But now, having said that, I don't understand the law, but there's something that doesn't quite mesh about this.
I thought the policy was directed with beautification and Ms. Brule, am I not right in regard to that?
Well,
And Mr. Ben?
part of what we were attempting to do, since this is new, in essence new, and our enforcement is new, we were attempting to give a lot of these are tenants. We're attempting to give the tenants the opportunity to conform, and when they did not, then we were going to the property owner for the requirement that they conform. So this is sort of a acquiescence to the fact that we're now going through the process of a stronger enforcement effort, and so we're just trying to acclimate everyone to the change. And I understand Mr. Mullenix's frustration, we all wanted done yesterday, but in this case, we're just trying, it's an educational process.
And did I not see on there that we had like a whole lot of first-time complaints, and then it graduated down to fewer and fewer and fewer? Is that not the case?
Well, I can't really speak to complaints, Ben.
As far as he's nodding his head, yes.
Yes, sir. I think as the educational process continues, it will get better. But again, with the understanding that as soon as we have a whole new semester rolling, a
Yes.
whole new bunch of students rolling in, that educational process is going to have to occur again. And we're going to have to get to the point where we require to make sure he educates the people, but we do have a little bit of a process now. I think we'll eventually get there, it's just take down the, really right.
But the responsibility ultimately resides with the landowner, and he can do.
I don't think that's an argument. I think we all know that.
But he can take whatever measures he deems appropriate to rectify the situation with his tenants.
I think that's being done in most cases.
Okay.
I'd like to say this, that I think that they've done a magnificent job in enforcing the original, order, the ordinance. You know, I've seen the corrals all over the city of Starkville, and in a very short period of time, they just left. And I can, and maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, I still seen one here and one there. And now you can drive almost over the entire city of Starkville and you cannot find a corral.
And that's good.
I want to compliment them, the people that's enforcing it, what they're doing. I see them putting garbage out at the proper times that we talked about doing. So I think it's similar to you referred to law enforcement, where if we put up a stop sign in Starkville, the police department has common sense enough and tolerance that they don't put a policeman there at that stop sign and everybody comes up there and runs through it to give them a ticket. They give them and I've noticed this on several places where that people, and I did it myself, drive through that stop sign down here at Welch's Funeral Home because I just wasn't used to it. But after a period of time, I got adjusted to it, same way on Whitfield Street. So I think that we need to be your committee need to be commending the city people for doing an outstanding job, and then we need to move into it gradually and not dropping the bomb on everybody, because it's people that don't take the newspaper or maybe don't see the news like they should. And it takes a period of time where the law enforcement facilities come to this person's house and says, you know, you're in violation of this and this, and I'll guarantee you 99% of the people will get in compliance.
That's not the people we're addressing, it's the ones that don't.
Yeah, but I mean, I just don't want the committee to be jumping the gun when
They can't jump in.
they are really doing a good job, and I don't want us to irritate the situation by saying that you're not doing the job we want you to do.
Nobody, did you hear what I said a while ago? I want to make it clear that we're not criticizing anybody.
And I should also point out that both Ben and Jeff, we have told them repeatedly, thank you for their efforts. And I've got 2 more sons. At several gatherings over the weekend, we had opportunities to talk with other citizens in this community. And we got down to discussions about city government. It is almost invariably happened. And one of the things that occurred as a result of that was that all of us, and we came from different parts of town, all of us wanted to say what a great group of city employees we have in this community. Better than we deserve, probably better than most places deserve. But we really thank all of you, Chief, Roger, Doug, Ed, Sharon, y'all are doing a terrific job, and your people are doing a terrific job, and we thank you. Okay?
Thank you for saying that, Clyde.
Clyde, I guess they did say y'all have a great board of aldermen too, did they?
Not yet. Not yet.
That comes up at election time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Richard, y'all keep the work up if you would. Ron, Clyde. Thank you. City Starkville Park Commission's annual report.
While Scott's setting this thing up here, I'd like to say just a few words about how far the parks have come in the past. How many of y'all know where Sutter Field is?
Very few. All of you got gray hair remembers that. That was the only park that we had. The baseball field that we had for the city was down at the school bus garage off Louisville Street. I was playing down there when the game had to end because Bailey Howell knocked the last ball we had in the city of Starkville over the pecan trees out on Gate Street. But now then, we have, the parks have come a long way. Of course, the city of Starkville has come a long way too since that time. If, How long ago was that, Dan? Day before yesterday, I believe. That was in the late 59, 60s, somewhere along in there. Mr. Wilbur Southers let us play over there on the
field behind
field behind Southern School, and that was all we had. You got it, Clark? Clark is going to be passing out some literature here. We got some the pool. A part of the pool stats and all did not get in the packet, so he's going to pass that out. We have a booklet of all the parks.
Daily attendance, finance,
This was working at 4:30 this afternoon.
Thank you.
daily attendance and revenue, day-to-day basis for attendance and revenue. I'm also gonna give each one of you our 2008 version of our new Parks Book Magazine. We cut it down this year, got the size down, and we're printing it ourselves this year with our new machine we have, so we don't have to outsource this printing anymore. Thank you.
As you can see on the screen, that's a picture of our first of the sportsplex, and that's soon to be overshadowed by our gym that we're in the process of building. You got it going.
I don't know.
While he's doing that, I'll go through and talk.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, go ahead. The city of Starkville owns 7 parks totaling 230 acres. We have 15 softball and baseball fields, 7 full-size soccer fields, and we also have international soccer events. They were here from 7 countries during this summer and filled up all the motels, all the rooms that we could get from Mississippi State. Tennis courts, we have 10, and we also share those and use the tennis courts from the schools. They use ours, we use theirs, so we have a great number of those. We have 4 outdoor basketball courts that we're working on. We have an inline hockey court. In that, we have 5 concession stands that operate. Restrooms are all for the 12 of those. That's scattered throughout all the parks. Community center, activity room, and then we have the only dog park in the state of Mississippi right now. We were a little hesitant on the dog park because of the liability. We figured that if a big dog eat up a little dog, we would be liable. So we had our attorney check that out, and that's no more than little Mikey jumping on little Bill. We are not liable for that. So that was one of the things that we were real concerned about. We've got 6 pavilions that we rent out for parties. We had a little complaint down in the Key Park about loud music and stuff, and we went back and redrafted our park. And I think Mr. Mills over there got the blunt of that because he lived down there. We would tell him that it was his party, so they didn't say too much about it. The Gillespie Street Center, we rent out. It had gotten, and I'll be the first to say, it had gotten in bad shape. But we've got it back up to speed now. We like a little landscaping on it, having it where it needs to be. I'm not going to read all of these statistics on what we have, youth sports and the money. Y'all all have that in front of you. Youth basketball, we have, you can see that we had 310 participating in that. Baseball was 500, and soccer was 750. Now, the soccer numbers are a little deceptive because you counting girls and boys both at the same time. We've added, hold on just a minute, had 1,028 players in the summer and spring adult softball. And that's a lot of people. Some of them are crossovers, but that's a lot of people to come to that uses the park. You have the tournament schedule, and these bring in, you can see 44 teams, 33 teams, 16 teams, 20, on down the line like that, and that brings in people, and that's what the 2% was all about, to bring in people to fill up the restaurants and the motels and stuff. We have, the next one is the summer. You see of some of the events we have, the cancer walk, Easter egg hunt, this type stuff. The programs, I'm gonna come back to the programs in just a minute and let Lisa tell you about that, because that's some of the stuff that probably not many people are aware that we have. The next one is a pavilion. It's a little bit different. We worked with the architectural school out at Mississippi State. They come up with this. It was really built to look like that. That's not the way it just happened. We are in, when we get through with this, we got the fence to go around it, so you can sit there and read and let your children play without worrying about them getting in the street. In the future, we want to put restrooms there, and we're going to have a walking track around the inside of the fence. That is a well-used park. It's down on Whitfield Street, next to the Green Oak subdivision. The dog park is the next. We had a grand opening, not a grand opening, but a ribbon cutting of the $5.5 million basketball gym. We had 6 people there. We had the opening of the park, and we had about 30 people there. So I kind of tell you that Starkville is going to the dogs. On the next page is the addition to we will have 2 basketball courts, 2 racquetball courts, a 3-lane walking track that will be elevated around the top, kind of like the Methodist Church, and I think most of you have seen that one. Conference room, stage, and we will have an amphitheater out back that the stage door will open, and you can access it from the outside and also from the inside. That is well underway. If you haven't been down through there, the slab has been poured for the gym. It's the gym floor itself, and it's making good progress. We are also looking into the possibility of wrestling. We were talking to people in Birmingham that it's real big over there. They were talking about, with it not being in the schools, we didn't feel like that we would have probably an uphill battle. But looking at it, we decided if we could get it in the parks, then we might could get it into the schools. But the parks have come a long way. We have 14 full-time employees. On the gym, when we get it put together, we will probably have to employ at least 2 more part-time. We're going to do some people shuffling. Instead of everybody coming down at 8:05 in the morning, we're going to let some come at noon and stay till we close the gym. Those hours will be determined depending on the usage of the gym. Our 2% money, as y'all can see in here, is coming in real good. And I'm going to use this, and I'm not plugging any restaurant, but I remember when Richie's Restaurant was built their steakhouse on a $7.95 ribeye at 2% tax. Now then, that same ribeye is $15.95, and we get 2% of that. So just the food, just the cost of food itself, let alone the expansions of all the new restaurants and all we have, has increased this. Now, our fund, as y'all know, was set up for 20 years, and I see no reason why we can't pay that off in 10 years or less. That's what we're shooting for. Lisa has got, she does the adult senior citizens program down there. She hadn't invited me yet, but I don't know why. I'm going to let her tell you exactly, because most people think that the parks are just for kids to play ball in. And I want her to tell you exactly what she does and the different programs that we have to offer down there. Lisa?
I'm the program coordinator down at Starkville Parks. I do senior citizens activities as well as kids activities as well. And mostly it's all non-sport related activities. The first half of the chart is my senior citizens. The first part is what we do on a weekly basis. On Mondays, we have two things going on. We have line dancing. On Monday afternoon, we have a volunteer that comes in and teaches line dancing. You can see about the number of participants and the age group we're looking at. They enjoy it. They get a lot of exercise, social interaction. Also, they've been invited to the Cotton District Festival to dance there as well as other festivals. On Monday nights, we have square dancing, and I think this group has been part of the Parks Department for at least 20 years. They come from 7 to 9. They have a caller that does the square dancing. Anyone is welcome to come. Mostly it's senior citizens, but younger people are invited as well. Tuesday mornings, I do a senior citizens craft group. And again, this group has been in the Parks Department for 20 years. Some of the ladies that's in this have been in it from day one. We do a wide variety of crafts. A lot of times it's mostly sewing. They've made several quilts. Also, we do potlucks where they get together and socialize. This morning we had our Christmas party, which they like to come and just socialize, give out Christmas presents to each other. Thursday mornings we have a Quilters Guild again. Ladies come with their own projects, help each other, socialize. Again, line dancing is very popular. On Thursday nights we have a line dancing group that meets there as well. So that's the weekly events that go on in our activities room. Special meetings or conferences, again, a variety of quilting conferences, workshops. We usually have a 2-day workshop in the summer for quilters. Saturdays they like to come from 8 to 5 and do a wide variety of things for an 8-hour event. The health department, we partnered up with them. They come and talk to my senior group at least probably 6 times a year. Different topics that interest the senior citizens: diabetes, nutrition, strokes, how to prevent, so forth. The last thing I want to talk to you about on the seniors is we have an Easter egg hunt for the seniors at Easter time, and it is pretty funny to go and watch. They get as excited about an Easter egg hunt as the kids, get just as competitive with it and everything, and they enjoyed doing that. It's out at McKee Park. For the kids' activities is the last half of it. We have, during the school year, at least once a month, I have an after-school program where the kids come and do a themed craft project, usually from 3 to 5. We have various egg hunts. We have a Halloween egg hunt that we've just been doing for the past probably 3 or 4 years. There's a company that does black and orange eggs, so we spread out about 1,000 eggs per softball field, split up the different age groups. They start from age 3 up to 8, and we do a Halloween egg hunt. Usually have about 150 participants on that. Also for Halloween, we participate with MSU on the Halloween Carnival. We have a booth set up, give out candy, help out with that. Our Easter egg hunt is very big. We have usually about 300 kids, and again, we use our softball fields. We have 3 softball fields, 3 different age groups, probably about 1,300 eggs per softball field. And I have a service fraternity from MSU that comes out and helps me, Alpha Phi Omega, and ages range again from 3 to 10 on that. Summer activities, try to keep the kids busy when they're out of school. We have a tennis camp for kids down there at the Starkville High tennis courts. We have various kids crafts, kids ceramic, creative crafts, just different painting, ceramics, woodworking, just to keep them busy. Also, I have a kids camp, like for 1 week. They come from 8 to 12 just to get them out of the house, keep them busy in the summer. Last thing is we are partnering with MSU for the past 3 years. I've helped the TK Martin Center, and the latest grant we're helping them with is Express Yourself Art. And I go on Thursday mornings, and we help 10 adults with various disabilities with painting and assisting with them on that as well.
One thing that we forgot to mention was cheerleaders. We took on a cheerleader camp, and we had 85 participants in the cheerleading outfit. And also, we met with the disability ADA, and we went through every park that we had, and they made a list and prioritized a list of what we need to do to get it up to par. And 95% of it is just stuff that we can do on a day-to-day basis. The rest of it we can do, and I think we'll have all of that up in the near future. I'd like for all of y'all to go by and look at the progress that's made down on Lynn Lane on the gym. I think it's coming along real good. The building is supposed to be delivered second week in January, and you'll be able to see stuff start to come up out of the ground. We've been spending a lot of money under the ground, but is there any questions anybody have?
Dan, come on, pass these books out.
Yeah. Board members, do you have any questions?
Dan, just a question, the park at Moncrief, is it officially called the Green Oaks Neighborhood Park, or are y'all still working on a name for that?
We've been calling it Whitfield, but we hadn't officially named it yet.
Okay.
We haven't named it yet. That was kind of Summer's deal over there, and he wanted to name it the Summer Memorial Park, but he wouldn't participate in the last part, so we could call it the Memorial, so I don't know what we're gonna do. But we will come up with a name for it. If anybody in Lisa's program, any of these assistant living houses that you see, any of those people that you think would get something out of her program, something to do, y'all encourage them to come, because that's a part that 90% of the people don't even know we do at the park. And Lisa does a good job, and of course she's getting old enough now till you go in there, you can't tell where she's in the group or she's the leader of the group. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Dan.
Yeah, excuse me.
Dan, no, I really didn't have a question. I have a comment about the park, King Park. And after the first of the year, I'll get with you.
Okay. All right.
Do some discussion on that.
Be
I
fine.
hadn't forgotten it. I just kind of been out of touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your health care needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in health care.
Require that they are working on that particular site. They're not staying on this site and working at other sites in the city, so it's very specific. Also, that the mobile homes trailers would be connected to sanitary sewer and water, as well as electrical service, so they're not running on generators or on a septic type system. They would be inspected. We would not issue a certificate of occupancy, but they would be inspected and allowed to be used, because a certificate of occupancy obviously is for permanent use. Try to tie the removal of the trailers to the CO of the primary project, in this case the Hilton Garden Inn. Before the certificate of occupancy would be issued, the trailers would need to be removed. Also, the trailers would have to be skirted, and there'd be some type of mulch for the parking areas, so that you don't have the erosion washing into the street, or if it's dry, blowing up in the wind and blowing onto other properties. I don't know if there's anything specific. I tried to come up with some guidelines to address that, and open to discussion if there's any questions that some of the board members may have.
Any board members have discussion and questions about this?
I don't have any questions, but I do think that as Starkville works to attract more large-scale development, this is going to come up more unless we do go ahead and set something in place now. I think you've written a pretty sound policy, so I would move approval of the temporary construction housing policy.
Do we have a second? Jim, seconded.
Mr. Mayor, before we
Yes.
go on, would these fall under our definition of family as far as people who could live per unit?
How do you mean?
What's our current definition of family as far, I guess it would
Up to
matter.
5
'cause it'd
people
be-
related, I believe. Would this have anything to do with that?
That's probably gonna be a question for the city attorney, because there's other, I mean, I know there's a definition in place. I'm not sure about, that, about the particulars, how that would apply, but there's also basic requirements as far as life safety code, as far as, property maintenance, as far as how many square feet of living area or sleeping area, and that is, for air and for ventilation, and also for, I believe it's based on so many square feet, so that in case of an emergency, someone, or whoever's, like
So
say,
at site plan, you're gonna wanna see how many people they're proposing to live in each one of these trailers?
as far as,
When you have a site plan provided to you, are you gonna ask them how many people are gonna be living per trailer?
well, a lot of that, what we could ask that if you think we should, but a lot of it's gonna be determined how many square feet are in the trailers.
My understanding of the definition of family that has come up
Yeah,
before
it's
was that
for-
applied to residential.
Right, but I was saying,
This is-
could-
Temporary housing on commercial, something zoned commercial, so.
Right, that's why I said there wouldn't be a certificate of occupancy issued, because that gives way to permanency. So they'd be inspected and they'd be allowed to be used, the same as a job trailer on a construction site. I think the last one was at the CVS. They had an office trailer.
But-
We didn't issue a CO for it, but it had power, I believe it had water. I don't think it had a commode, I think they had a sink, so.
But this is gonna be for living purposes.
It is, but there's there's other sections of the international, I wanna say the property maintenance code that we've adopted that call out specific square footages for living and sleeping areas. So based on whatever the size of the mobile homes or trailers would be, we could make a determination from that.
So you don't have a problem in that site plan to ask them how many people are gonna be living per unit that they're showing on their site plan?
I think-
To
I
make
think-
sure that we.
I think that would be appropriate and in line, and it's covered under our currently adopted, not under our code of ordinances, but under the property maintenance code that we've adopted as part of the building codes.
I'd also like to see us ask for a copy of their federal I-9 forms for those residents in those trailers.
Have we got a code now, how many people can stay in a motel room? Live in a motel room?
I don't believe we do. I'd have to look and make
Well,
sure.
we need to be careful, because I know that, there's a motel over here on 82 Highway, and it's construction workers. And, I have seen as 40 and 50 people on that ledge back there, and all of them living in 6 to 8 rooms. And I don't know where, there's nobody complained about it, other than the fact that, they cook a lot on the outside and drink a lot of beer. But it's probably 8 to 10 or more people living in one room. And I don't think we need to deviate from, some individual coming in here as a contractor. And then what we've got going on locally here in our motels.
I believe and I'd have to look, I believe the state determines some regulations for occupants, number of occupants in a hotel room. They have separate
may be.
regulations.
But I have property adjoining that motel, and from time to time, they have not caused a lot of problems. It's just the fact that it's a lot of people. It's on at night, are cooking back there on the ledges and, congregating, and they're staying in those motel rooms.
Any other questions?
Richard, since you've already made a motion, would you amend number 3, that in the site plan, they provide the specific number for those living in these structures, and also provide federal I-9 forms for all of those people?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second, and we have a few adjustments and tweaking of it.
Just another question. How many, the way this policy reads, Ben, is that the number of temporary structures shall not exceed 3 structures per acre of the project site, and then you also say that it can't be on anything smaller than 3 acres, so are we talking about, we could have a 9-trailer
Yes.
on that site?
So if you had a 3-acre site, 3 acres, three per acre, so you could have 9, be maximum of 9.
I just have some reservations about what this is gonna, what it's gonna look like, what it's gonna turn into, and I just don't think we're ready. I prefer to see us postpone this and see if we can't tweak this, and obviously considerations of having our developers use local businesses and local workers and those type of things in general, but certainly at the this current proposal, we're talking about 9 trailers on a site, and it's starting to sound like Trailer City, and I'm just not comfortable with that.
Well, it's temporary. You know, most big construction sites, you do see trailers for people that come in and do this. Are there any other questions? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you, Ben. It passes.
Thank you, sir.
Report from the Technology Committee. Richard?
Okay, the first item has already been taken care of. The second one, consideration of the postponement of the contract with Redflex. The thought process in committee was to adopt, in essence, a wait-and-see attitude. We have 2 cities in the state of Mississippi currently in the process of installing red light cameras, Columbus and Tupelo. And so one thought was just to go ahead and give it some time there, let the cameras be installed, and kind of see over time the kind of impact it has on those communities, and then come back with recommendation based off that. I don't believe there's any board action needed for postponement, but
That's just basically your report, I believe. Anybody got any questions?
What type of timeline were we talking about, Richard, from a time to consider?
I was thinking 6 months. However, there's been some slowing down of the process because of working out and ironing out issues with MDOT. However, I believe the cities are going to start putting the cameras soon on their public roads and not the highways, at least from the start. And so I would say 6 months after that.
Someone, I know you weren't at that discussion. Are you comfortable with that timeline? That
Putting it off, yeah, I think it's a good idea, just for a variety of reasons.
Thank you.
We'll move on. Consideration of a speed table policy for the city of Starkville. Bill, you in here?
I am, yes.
I think you got some thoughts on this as well, have you not? Okay.
Ms. Sproul, is this the same policy, or have you tweaked it since the last time we've seen it?
Tweaked it slightly. And
What are
it
those
was
slight
tweaked,
tweakings?
it was tweaked basically because of the recognition or finding of a new style of speed hump that is a rubberized, movable. Now, Mr. Webb has some reservations about it, but from a policy standpoint, we felt like we could go forward with the policy. How and if we do the rubberized ones versus the asphalt ones that are currently on Hiawassee remains yet to be seen. But the policy from that standpoint was tweaked. I think the board at the time that they adopted the crosswalk policy had some concerns about the speed hump policy based on the payment for it, and we've tweaked it to the sense that, you know, the city engineer and the police chief are the determining individuals for whom the speed bumps would be decided where they would go, and that keeps the board out of the, you know, politicizing it. If a neighborhood really wants it badly enough to pay for it, yet it's determined by the city engineer and the police chief that it's not necessary for that neighborhood, then they may proceed with a petition, much like the renaming of the street. And if they get enough votes and petition signatures and they want to pay for it, then they may go ahead and pay for it, unless, of course, the city attorney, the
city engineer and the police chief find that it is detrimental to the neighborhood, in which case that's a whole nother item. But essentially, we were trying to put forward some sort of policy, and I think the police chief was very, pleased or interested in the rubberized concept, and that's why I brought it back at this point in time, because this was a new technology, or at least a new product that was on the market. Now, Bill has said, and I don't want to speak for him, that he thinks that it's probably cheaper to do the asphalt and take the asphalt up than it is to do one of these rubberized things. So that kind of came up this morning, I believe it was, as opposed to back when I was doing this last week. But he can certainly speak to that himself.
Well, that is my main concern, and Lynn called me last week at home and asked me for the price of what I had come up with, the price versus what we did on Hiwassee Drive, and it got me thinking that the same size speed hump or table that we put on Hiwassee in this new material would be like $8,000 plus installation costs versus about $1,500 as asphalt. The selling point on it was that it can be picked up and moved, which it can, but then you have to pay again to install it, and also have to pay to uninstall it. And it just strikes me as it'd be cheaper in the long run just to bulldoze it or tear the thing up and throw it away, start over with a new one.
Recyclable asphalt?
Recycle the asphalt.
Let me throw something out. I've seen these around town in other places, and the bad thing about asphalt is you can tear up the bottom of cars with a rubber one. You can't. You'll actually dig into the rubber with the car, but it won't damage the drivetrain, it won't damage the rims or the oil pan or such as that. They are a little more expensive, obviously, but by the time you install one for the city made out of concrete or asphalt, and you have one of these high-end sports cars go through there and tear the oil pan out of the transmission, you have to pay for it if you do. I think if the neighborhoods are willing to pay for it, we're not talking about that many, there's limited numbers of these that we put around town. I think it would be a more user-friendly type thing. Mr. Webb's right, the frugality of it on the less expensive asphalt version would be certainly cheaper, but I think in this case you get what you pay for, and you're not recognizing the rubber version for what it is, which is a way of not damaging the cars of the citizens. So that was the reason I was excited about it. And I've actually seen some of these. Matter of fact, I saw one about a week ago and looked at them, and if a car hits it, it just digs into the rubber like if it's not, I mean, you really gotta hit it a pretty good lick. It's gotta be a rubber car, but it won't hurt the bottom of the car, it won't hurt the rubber, so it seems to be a better option.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
In light of these conflicting reports from various department heads, I move we take this under advisement.
Okay.
Is that the policy, I mean, we have a policy in front of you, and then you have the other piece of it, which is the actual rubberized deal
We need
itself.
to all do it at the same time, the whole shooting match, Mr. Rule.
We have a motion to take this under advisement. We have a second of that motion.
Second.
Is the board wanting to set a date for when we're gonna take this back up, or direct it to go to a specific
My
committee?
motion was to take it under advisement, Mr.
Just
Rule.
take it under advisement.
And when we can work out details, then we can bring it back up.
And he has a second to his motion.
I just hope it doesn't end up in a black hole.
Could be. All those in favor of taking this under advisement, please raise your hand. All those opposed? We'll take that under advisement. The next one is the adoption of standardizing of the school zone traffic
Might as well stay here.
markings. I believe y'all looked at this carefully.
We did,
A lot of work in this.
and it came up because of, we had under citizens' comments, which that proves the value of citizens' comments on, with some frequency. There was a lack of standardization, not a vast lack of standardization, but some, and so I went through the process of, looking at, Bill and I rode around and to see where it might be that we could better improve our signage and our, speed control in the school zone areas, and we have provided you a map in your packet, maps plural in your packet, and there are three options. One is very expensive, one is fairly expensive, and the other one is rather inexpensive. I was attempting, my first thought was to do this in a very first-class fashion, which is the solar flashing, school zone light is, when the light's flashing, the school zone is in effect. Those are rather expensive, but Mr. Hadaway's budget allows for lights. So I was talking with him about that. He could conceivably phase that in over a period of years. However, there are three different options. One of them is all standardized the same. The other one is to take the major road thoroughfares and put the flashing lights on them, and then on the smaller side streets put on just the signs without the flashing lights. And then the other one is to standardize them, put them in the places that we're placing on the maps, but also just have the sign that needs, a lot of them need to be redone, but have the sign that says, school zone and whatever the appropriate time frame is. Because right now it says when children are present, and that doesn't tell anybody anything, because children are around the school zone pretty much, 7 to 5, but I don't necessarily think that's when we want everybody going 15 miles per hour. So we were trying to do it during the times that children go to and from school, which is a fairly standard practice. So it would vary depending on the school, obviously, and we'd have to consult with each one of the principals of the schools to determine what their hours are, but then we make the signage that goes with that. So that's in essence the thought process behind that. I think the standardization is an appropriate thing for us to do if the board is wishing to go forward with that at this time.
Do you have a timeline on how long it would take to phase this in through the electric department?
Probably a good 5 years. It's very expensive. They're very good looking. They would be very clean looking. They are down at what's the school off of Louisville
Emerson.
Street? Emerson? They're down off of
Some version of it.
Yeah, down off of Emerson now, but the solar powered ones are $3,000 essentially. And so when you look at needing 4 and 5 per school, that begins to add up. And Ed has said he has lighting in his budget, but probably not this year, and more than likely over the next 4 or 5 years we could phase them in. But
Any
obviously,
questions from the alderman?
I'm sorry, there was nothing in the budget on this, and that's the reason I wanted to bring it to you, both for a concept and for funding if the board was interested in going forward with it.
Would you like to study it?
If we can do it and do it through the electric department and not, as a result, cause any harm to our general fund, I know I personally don't mind phasing it in over time if we can do it right and have it look good.
Ed is amenable to that. Again, it's a lighting, and he has lighting, in his budget. But I just, we try to give you.
He's gonna save a lot of money by using the new technology he has at the corner of is it Loxley Way and that new LED lights that you have up there. Is that correct? And do you intend to do the whole city that way? By the way.
Initially, yes, sir.
Okay.
They're rather expensive, and, right now, it's always the money really do.
Just from a
And I congratulate you for taking the initiative to do that.
Just from a safety standpoint, are the flashing lights shown to be any better at reducing accidents?
I have no knowledge about that. They may very well be, but I don't have any data that supports that. I didn't look for it actually.
What's your, well, I think it flashes the speed limit, isn't that what you're?
Well, the yellow light flashes, and it's the speed limit's in effect when the light is flashing.
Would it be fair to say that if we approve this tonight or in January, that it's not gonna impact the timing of when we might be able to install these?
Oh, no, it won't make any difference, because we're not gonna be able to do it this year. It's more of a concept, and we can go forward with, taking the signs and putting them. We have some that now that are effective and that we can go ahead and place in the determined locations that, the city engineer has said would be more appropriate. For example, we have some on, North Jackson that really don't need to be on North Jackson. We move them, if you look at your map, we'll move them closer, and make them more appropriate for the Southern School Zone, for example. But we can do those things now, but it's the actual purchase of these that would take some period of time.
You're talking about a 5-year totally implementation time, is that?
Yes, and, we can start with my suggestion was to start with elementary schools, because those are the children obviously most at risk in the sense of their control of, what they do. And so move on from there. And it also, Overstreet and Sudeth, for example, one requires 3, and I think the other one requires 4. So it would be easier to do on a smaller
So if this is approved tonight, this is something that would take approximately 5 years to get totally implemented.
But we'd start seeing changes in a year.
Well, you can start seeing changes now, because we'll take some of the signs up that are not in a good location, and we will begin that process. But the actual lights themselves, the solar powered lights themselves, will take that period of time to all install.
I guess where I was leading is, I certainly appreciate the work and feel very comfortable in the repositioning that we were talking about, but I'm not prepared to talk about the long-term, the expending of funds, and certainly would like to see some of, I was a little bit confused about whether it flashes the speed or the lights, and maybe we can just get some examples.
Well, I was hoping the
pictures of them.
picture would give you, it doesn't, okay, I'm sorry, I was thinking that it provided,
It's very
some
thorough about
sense of-
placement. I mean, it's really a lot of very good work, just that one component of it.
okay,
I mean,
well, I'll look at, but I don't believe it flashes, but you probably can get one that flashes the speed, but the speed was steady, and the light was the one that was flashing. That was the one that I was attempting to, recommend to you. Because we were gonna standardize the speed throughout as well at 15.
So if the board was to request that we go ahead and reposition as you're recommending with the existing signage, is that something that requires a motion from us, or do y'all feel comfortable?
Well, I'd be happy to go ahead and do it. I just wanna make sure y'all are comfortable and we have your, willingness to have us proceed. And you can do it by nodding your head, or you can do it by whatever pleases you.
I would, just to be on the safe side, then I'll go ahead and motion approval of standardization of our school signs as proposed in this packet. And then we can come back as a board to discuss the flashing lights later.
The funding, okay.
Do we have a second to your motion?
Second.
Motion is second. All of you have heard the motion, the discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion. All those opposed? Mr. Perkins, are you abstaining?
I'm voting present, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item E is consent. Item F, consent. Item G is consent. Departmental business. On airport, the purchase of the lawnmower has been removed. Second item is consent. Building codes and planning department. Ben, I think you have about 4 items here.
Mr. Mayor, the items that are in this section are what went to the from the Planning and Zoning Board, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last week. The first item is a zoning map amendment requested by John and Wanda Lee, and the property is located on the north side of Highway 12, west of the Highway 25 bypass. The property was annexed into the city in 1998 and assigned a zoning classification in 2001. The Lees had joined with others in the area from their property eastwards to the former site of Sanders Grocery seeking C2 zoning. The official zoning map shows 2 parcels on either side of the section line running north-south down the middle of Bluefield Road. C2 is shown to the east of the section line and B1 is shown to the west of the section line. The proposed land use map dated August 2000, which is over here behind Ms. Tyndall, I had it out where folks could look at it before the meeting, shows the property configuration and zoning the same as the official zoning map. And the reason that we wanted to show this map was when we were doing research, both the building department as well as Ms. Tyndall on the board minutes, this map and a report that was prepared by the Central Planning Office in Jackson was referenced several times. This was a draft map prepared in August of 2000. As you can tell, some areas look very similar to our official zoning map, but there's been some changes as well. So I wanted to put that on display. That's the only version that we have. Ms. Tyndall obtained that from Jackson, and we don't have an electronic version or a smaller version that I can put in your packets, so that's just for reference. When the zoning map is compared to the property appraiser map, which I've included in your packets, you can see that there's an extra parcel to the west of the section line. That section line, again, runs north-south. The legal description of the leased property matches the parcel shown to the east of the section line. What occurred at the P&Z meeting over the last 2 months, this was continued so the lease could provide some additional information, which was included in your packet, and it's a collection of maps and also articles from the Starkville Daily News about public hearings, and also the notices of several public hearings that occurred over a 2-year period for the zoning of these properties. The legal description, again, that the lease for the leased property matches that on the east side of the section line. Actually, the legal description shows that section line is their western property boundary. The residents of the Pinecrest subdivision spoke in opposition to the zoning map correction as shown on the map. I believe there were 12 or 14, I believe, that spoke in opposition. But the P&Z voted 4-1 in favor to recommend correction of the zoning map to the mayor and to the Board of Aldermen. It's a real concise summary of what occurred over 2 planning and zoning meetings. And there's a lot of information that y'all had in your packets. The main thing, if you compare the zoning map, which is in color in your packets, to the property appraiser map, and there's an aerial as well as a parcel map, you can see that there's an extra parcel on the west side of that section line that should not be there. So there's actually it's a zoning map correction that's the requirement here.
Question from any of the board members?
Mr. Faber, is there an error on the zoning map with this?
It appears to me there is, and I also, as you read in the paper, that was my house that I grew up in, so I'm familiar with the boundary line, and there's no way that that map is consistent with the the property maps of the county, and also you can see the aerial map, and you can see the deed from where my parents deeded the property to the Lees in 1980. At the west boundary is the section line that runs alongside it. Clearly, that's not the boundary line that's reflected on our map.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to correct our zoning map to properly show the zoning of the Lee's property. That's C2.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. Your next item.
Mr. Mayor, the next item is a request for a final subdivision plat approval of the Kirkling subdivision by Mr. Paul Roberts. The property is located on the west side of South Montgomery Street between the entrances of the Country Club Estate subdivision. It's a 5-acre parcel consisting of 18 single-family residential lots. It's zoned R1 single-family and meets all the R1 zoning dimensions. All utilities and roadways will be dedicated to the city. There are 20-foot strips along Montgomery Street that have been reserved for any future right-of-way improvements to match those of Country Club Estates. And an irrevocable letter of credit has been provided to the city engineer for the final layer of roadway asphalt. One thing to note, there's a typo in the acknowledgement which will be corrected on the plat copies that will be provided by the surveyor for signature prior to recording. I need to point that out. That came up at the P&Z meeting.
Question from any of the aldermen? And your planning zone voted unanimous?
Yes, sir, they did. I'm sorry.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval, Kirkland subdivision, R1 family zone located on South Montgomery Street and the entrances of Country Club Estates.
We have a motion to second. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? No opposition. Next item, please.
Mr. Mayor, the next item is a request for preliminary subdivision plat approval for the Elsco subdivision by Mr. Andre Taylor. The property is located at the northeastern intersection of West Side Drive and Frontier Street. It's a 1.23-acre parcel consisting of 6 single-family residential lots. The property is zoned R2, single-family duplex, and meets all the R2 zoning dimensions. The property was rezoned in March of this year from C2 to R2 for this purpose. Utilities and roadway are located in the adjacent right-of-way, and the final plat will show the easements for the exact location of utilities to the individual residences. This is a part of the Brick Fire Project, which is a nonprofit group, and the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval to the board.
Questions? Do we have a motion?
Mayor and Board, move approval of the preliminary plat from Andre Taylor for the Elsco subdivision.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, raise. Right. Your next item, please.
Mr. Mayor, the next item is consideration of a finding of fact regarding the resignation of Planning and Zoning Commissioner Lee Beck from Ward 4. Mr. Beck has moved from Ward 4 to Ward 2 and provided a resignation letter. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended that the Board of Aldermen place a public notice in the local newspaper and seeking qualified candidates to fill the position. Mr. Beck's term expires June 30th of 2009. As a side note, Ward 2 Commissioner Michael Gann has tendered his resignation effective January 1st due to his moving out of the city, and his term expires June 30th, 2008. So at the January meeting, we'll do a finding of fact and bring that back to the board as well. Is that with a letter of recommendation per the city attorney?
Item E under board business also incorporated this, the authorization to advertise for letters, which we
Yes.
approved, so.
Mr. Gann had let us know that he was in the process of moving, and when he told me that, I advised him that we would need a letter of resignation, and I received it yesterday.
So we've already given approval to advertise then.
Basically, so a little bit
Okay, so
ahead
this is
here.
just kind of a report, and there's no action that's needed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I got one other thing just to bring up as a follow-up on the conditional use ordinance. There was a fee resolution that went with that, so that needs a separate vote. There's the ordinance, and then there's a fee resolution that we did, to establish the fees for that.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the fee resolution for the conditional use ordinance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor of the fee resolution, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Passes.
Mr. Mayor, do we need to actually have a finding of fact on our minutes of Mr. Beck's change in residency or not, Mr. Attorney?
The planning and zoning commission's already made,
Okay, we don't.
they
need to
just,
find-
they're requesting you accept their findings of fact,
Do we need an official motion to that effect
which you've done.
through the advertisement process?
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
On the Office of City Clerk, the first item is approval of claims vouchers on the consent. The second item is the authorization to designate the municipal depositories. Marquita for the year 2008-209 for the city of Starkville. And I think you got 4 bids back, is that correct?
That's correct. This is a request approval to designate the 4 proposals that we got back from Bancorp South, Bank First, Cadence, Merchant and Farmers, well, 5 of them in regions. The Bancorp South gave a 3.75% with no minimum floating rate, and a 3.5% fixed rate. Bank First gave a 4.26 on a floating rate, and with the interest rate would never go below 3.5%. And they gave a floating rate of 4.83%. I'm sorry, yeah, a floating rate of 4.83%.
So y'all studied this, and your recommendation is?
The recommendation is to, for us to stay with Bank First, but to designate all of the proposals as, depositories.
So I move that Bancorp South, Bank First Financial Services, Cadence, Merchant and Farmers, and Regions Banks be designated as municipal depositories for the 2-year period ending December 2009 and starting December 2007, and that we adopt Bank First as our favorable depository for the city based on the highest interest rate.
Second.
Motion is second. All those please in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marquita. The next item is elected departments consent, personnel's consent, public services. Richard asked for the number 2 item to be removed because I believe his father's involved in that. So at this time, we would accept the motion to consider purchasing from the Lamb Construction. Do I hear a motion?
Move we accept the bid of Lamb Construction amount of $51,276.27 for construction pressure reducing valve arrangement, acknowledging and finding as fact that it is best bid.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hands for the motion. Thank you. All those opposed? Richard, come on back in. This brings us now to executive session. Pardon me?
Consent agenda.
Oh, consent agenda, excuse me.
Mayor and board move approval of the consent agenda as enumerated.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the consent agenda approval, please raise your hand. This brings us down to the executive session of potential pending legislation and litigation.
Move that we go into closed session for the determination of need of executive session.